Everyone in Lean members, we've got a doubly special guest tonight. Obviously, current national president of the Labor Party, former treasurer, long-term climate supporter for Action, led us through the GFC, many things. I'd like you all to welcome Wayne Swan to speak to us tonight about climate action and obviously the future gas strategy, which has undermined a lot of what Labor's done and disappointed many Lean members. So welcome, Wayne.
Well, it's great to join you tonight, particularly with Peter. We did some great things together when we were in government. Look, I wanted to pay tribute to all the work of Lean over a very long period of time. It goes back a long way, but particularly over the last decade, and it's as important as ever. And whilst I understand that there have been some disappointments with recent government announcements, I believe we've got grounds for optimism because we have got a set of policies and a record which is extremely worthwhile, a lot more to do. But I think, as people who believe in the power of public policy to change lives, and people who really want to ensure that we can keep the global temperature increases down below 1.5, we've got a lot to do. And it's sobering, for example, to think back to 2011 when we put in place a carbon price, the CEFC, a whole lot of other arrangements. We are reminded what would have Australia been like if that package back there in 2011 had operated for the last decade. We would be leading the world in the energy transition. But what it also teaches us about is just how vicious and nasty and damaging the attitudes of the Conservative parties in this country are to climate change. I mean, they're essentially using nuclear energy at the moment as a camouflage for their hostility to renewable energy and their climate denial. So we should never forget what they've done over the last decade and what they could do again. But I don't say that in any way to deflect attention away from the really critical issues at the moment. And I understand there are plenty in Lean who are disappointed. But first and foremost, we have to understand the centrepiece of the last budget was the energy transition, whichever way you look at it. And the government is making very significant advances when it comes to increasing the supply of renewables in the system. But when it comes to the gas strategy, when it comes to what do we do about reducing as much as we possibly can the use of fossil fuels, then we've got to be up for that task. We've also got to recognise that gas is a transition fuel, but we do not want to be necessarily opening new supplies. We want to absolutely electrify, if you like, the country. There's a lot more to be done on the downside, and we know the government is looking at sectoral plans in that area. So I think it's up to us who are concerned about this to make sure our voice is heard on that over the next 6 months or so. But I think there's a lot to be pleased about in what the government's got, a lot to be pleased about in what's been announced with Made in Australia, and a lot to look forward to if we can get the government a bit more responsive in the critical areas that I know that your members are concerned about.
Yeah. Now, Wayne, can I just ask, do you know your camera's not on?
No.
We love your voice, but I'm just not sure if you can get your camera on. If not, we'll continue as we go.
Yeah.
That's fine. Wayne, can I ask then?
Yeah.
Do you think there's something that we as Lean can, an action we can take to try and mitigate some of the disappointment and dismay and possibly damage that the future gas strategy being released on its own and in the kind of with the much more boosterous narrative than we would have, which is not the reality of what is Labor policy?
Well, I'm sure it's what lots of your members have been doing, and I would urge you to keep doing it. Speak to your local Labor members of Parliament about this and impress upon them how important it is, not just to the policy solution, but to the future of the fight against climate change in this country and, in fact, I think globally. We sat on the edge of something very significant in this country when we put in place the carbon price last time. Never forget that Conservatives blew it up in 2009 when we didn't get it through the Senate. So, there's still plenty to fight for and plenty to fight against, but we shouldn't assume that our current state of achievement is in itself something that would be maintained if the Conservatives came to power. So I would make all those points. And I know that as people are disillusioned with that announcement. I felt your pain. I shared your disappointment with that announcement because it didn't do justice to what the government has done or is planning to do.
Yes. Do you think there's merit in the government perhaps soon to release like a demand reduction strategy? I know that they're going a little.
I do. I absolutely do. I think all of that makes sense. But on the other side of the coin, we've got to recognise that gas is part of the transition. I mean, I've worked extensively on this transition in Queensland, where we are in a position where coal-fired power stations can be moved out on time or ahead of time because we've been building renewable energy around the power stations. It's much more advanced in Queensland than it is in any other part of the country. It's a great model. And equally, however, we need gas to back that up as well. Now, whether it is new gas supplies or old gas supplies in that part of the country, I'm not qualified to say. But what I am qualified to say is that part of our task in terms of reducing emissions is to not necessarily be using as much gas as we have been using. We need a demand strategy. So I think the party is up for that, and I think the government is up for that. And that's the discussion that we need to be having with the members of Parliament and with the ministers.
Fantastic. Now, are there any questions that I could quickly, anyone would like to ask? Because I know, Wayne, you're at an event and you've stepped aside to give us a few minutes because it's such an important topic, this one. Any questions from people? And is there anything else you'd like to tell us, Wayne, while we've got you?
I think we live in a time where where political activism must be valued. I mean, the rise of the radical right, globally, is a real threat to the sort of values and politics that we in the social democratic movement share. We can't take for granted that some of the successes we've had can be maintained, not just in climate, but across the board in terms of the quality and endurance of our democracy, the right of a woman to choose. All of these fundamental values are on the line, and particularly so in the United States later this year. The sort of right-wing backlash that we're facing, which you could call Trumpism, isn't something that is just destructive when it comes to the issues of climate. It goes to the very core of social cohesion and the commitment of having a more collective approach to global affairs.
Yeah. I just had one quick question from one of our members. I'm not sure how closely you followed our forestry campaign that we did win the commitment for a national updated or a renewed national forest policy statement. Do you think there's any movement? Again, is it just continually knocking on the door, making the argument of why it matters, or how we get traction on that one to do that big statement, that big industry piece?
I think it's the same as I said before. There's a couple of pieces where you want more ambition and more progress, and I think you've proved effective at doing this in the past. I don't think you should see it as a reflection on lean as to what happened, a month or two ago. I think there were a particular set of circumstances that led to some of the less desirable aspects of the announcements. But I think we've just got to keep working at it.
Yeah. All right. Well, then that's all the questions we've got for you right now. Wayne, thank you very much for taking time to be with us. I think it's heartening to hear from a lean perspective, because I know all of the people on this call tonight, but also around the country, are working really hard consistently.
No, I know they are, and I know you are sort of some of the hardest working activists I've seen in the Labor movement, and I've been in it for 50 years.
Well, that's a compliment, everyone. But yes, so thank you for coming and just reassuring us that we're not the only ones in this fight, and obviously that there is more that the Labor government needs to do around demand reduction, as well as being realistic about the transition ahead. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, and sorry about the quality of the presentation. Bye.
Bye.